Welcome to Ask the Superintendent, a podcast created to have a candid conversation with the superintendent and his leadership team based on your questions. We know your child's education at Little Elm ISD matters, and it is important for you, our community, to have access to the information you need by asking important questions to the leaders who make decisions. The topics we discuss are endless, but very important. Our vision is to become the destination district by building great schools, great community, furthering education, one question at a time. Hey everyone, Cecelia Jones, Director for Communication, also your host for Ask the Superintendent. And with me is our Superintendent Daniel Gallagher and Assistant Superintendent for Business and Finance, Shay Adams. If you're just tuning in and didn't listen to the last podcast, we're talking about Bond 2022 and sharing information we've been able to collect from our community on their thoughts about the May bond election. And to catch you up, that bond failed by around 190 votes. We've been centering our conversation around the thoughts we've received from the Thought Exchange survey we sent out right after the bond failed. And after a meeting with the Long Range Facilities Planning Committee, we believe voters may have been confused about the language that was on the ballot. Daniel and Shay, can you explain to our listening audience more about that language and why we were required to put that there?
Yeah, back in 2017, when the board called for the previous bond that provided us, thanks to the community, provided us Walker Middle School and Strike Middle School and some other additions, athletic facilities and such. That language was not required, but the Texas legislature out of good intentions for transparency purposes, had a requirement that all bond elections, the ballot language has to have the wording, "This is a tax increase." And I'm going to let our Assistant Superintendent for Business and Finance explain what that means.
Thank you, Daniel. And as you said, House Bill 3 back in 2019 really, and I'm going to actually read you the mandate, it amended the Section 45003 to require school districts to include that statement, "This is a property tax increase." And it provides that the ballot must include, and school districts cannot modify that amount on it. And with that change, even if it's not a tax increase, in fact, even if it's a tax decrease, if you're projecting that, it still has to be included. That language does. And there's a lot of anxiety about a lot of different things right now. And so seeing that on the ballot, it transfers into anxiety with someone that doesn't really understand why is that on the ballot and why does it say that? And it's scary for a lot of people. And so one of the reasons, as Daniel said, that it's on there is, well, the main reason it's on there is just required. And we want to be transparent as well. And the legislature really instituted this to make sure that school districts were transparent with their taxpayers. And what they're trying to portray especially is that even though your tax rate may not be going up, you're extending the debt of the school district. And when school districts issue bonds, it's kind of like whenever you purchase a mortgage or a vehicle. And so one example that we use often with that is whenever you have a car payment, say your car payment is $450 a month, and you drive that car over 5 years, 7 years, whatever it is, and you trade your car in, whether you'd paid it off, and a lot of times you had, but you trade your car in, you may still have a payment of $450 a month, but you have new debt. You've extended that debt. And unfortunately, we have to explain a lot of how school districts are funded in order to truly explain this, and it gets into the weeds a little bit. But it's important for people to understand that there are two separate pieces of the tax rate, and the piece of the tax rate that is intended for us to purchase school buildings, to build schools, and to purchase school buses and so forth, is from our interest and sinking side of the tax rate. We aren't funded without the approval of our voters. We are not funded to be able to purchase school buildings, build school buildings out of our general fund.
And I think that's important. As you're talking about this, I think back to, I've had comments on social media where they say, well, I won't support a bond until the district raises salaries or until the district does this.
Right.
And unfortunately, we can't. Bond going out for a bond has nothing to do with raising salaries, nothing to do with really our operating costs.
In fact, we can't use any of our bonded money for those purposes. And that is just such a confusing piece for people that don't live in that world. But we absolutely cannot use bonded indebtedness, which has to be approved by the voters. We can't issue it unless the voters say, yes, you can issue these bonds, and that our taxable values support the repayment of that. And that's the only thing we can do with that money is those dedicated projects. And Daniel's exactly right. People ask, well, why can't you do this with it? And we can't.
Right. And this system of funding, which I'm not going to try to get into, Shay can do a much better job explaining
Very
it than
complicated.
I can. But I'm not even sure, the people that are voting on this in Austin can explain it. It's very complex. I will say this, that, the only way we can build schools, and this is for every district across the state, is through bond elections. If we don't pass a bond, we will not build new schools, and then we can talk at some point about what happens if the bond doesn't fail again or it doesn't pass again.
Right, and you did mention something about what we can and can't do with bond money. So can you break that down? What does that look like?
So with there being two separate pieces of the school district's tax rate, again, there's a general fund piece, and that's what we fund our day-to-day operations with. That's what we can use whenever our funding allows to give teacher raises. That's what we use to pay our utilities and just as I said, day-to-day operations. And then the other piece is dedicated specifically to repay debt of the district. And our debt service rate, the rate that we charge our constituents, is 47 cents. And if this bond had passed, our rate would have remained 47 cents. And it's currently 47 cents because, again, that is our payment, as you will, on the car payment example that I used earlier. That is our payment against that debt. And so as we issue bonds, as we build projects, then our debt portfolio changes, and we manage that to make sure that the school district is being conservative and making sure that not only can we make our payments this year, but that we can make our payments throughout the life of the debt. Right. And there are actually a lot of different steps that go into any time that we're going to issue debt. The Attorney General has to approve our calculations and our estimates and so forth. But the only thing that we can do with that is the projects that were approved at the authorization.
Daniel, is there anything else that you think that maybe people at home, need to understand about the tax rate?
No, I think Shay explained it well. I think the key for the voters and the community to think about is, we attempted to go up for a bond that would not have increased the current tax rate. It did not pass, and unfortunately, as we mentioned in the previous podcast, now we can't go out for that same exact amount without it costing more. So, it's a challenge, and obviously we trust the voters. We're going to listen to the voters. The voters are going to decide the future of this district. And what I've always said is, we will respect what the community decides, but the students are coming. We're going to have over 10,000 students in this district, and we already have some schools that are. There's several students in them, and we've talked about that at our meetings, and all of that information is on our website.
So if the school board were to call for another election, voters need to understand they're going to see that same ballot language. And I think one of the challenges that school districts face is trying to package what you guys just explained in 10 minutes on a piece of paper, in a video, in meetings. It is a challenge. And so if you go to the ballot, if you go to the polls, if this bond were to be called again for November, we encourage you to seek out that information. We're sending out flyers. We're creating videos. We've got a website that's established that has all the information that voters need to know before they go vote at the polls.
And let me say something real quick to the community. This is a community process. This is not something that is driven by the school district. This is we have a long-range planning committee that is really all community members. Mm-hmm. So we need the community, when and if the board does call for this bond election, this is really incumbent upon community members to get out and learn what is in this package, learn about the benefits, the pros, the cons, and if they so choose, we need people to advocate for it and to push for this.
And that's one of the biggest things that I think is frustrating for us, that we frustrate citizens who say, but why didn't you tell us? Why can't you say this? And the fact is, once a bond is called, we can't.
We can only give the facts.
We can only give the facts. And the fact is that this statement will be on the ballot, and that we really can't say a lot more about that. And so, again, it is confusing to people that you say, this in our last package, this will not be a tax rate increase, but then they go to the ballot and it says that this is a property tax increase.
And let me say something else. And I've spoken to many superintendents across the state, and I actually had a couple superintendents advise me. They said, well, you should, talk to your board about just increasing the tax rate. Increase it because it already says it. And to me, we don't want to do that for this community. If we can keep the current tax rate the same, we're going to. We are a very fiscally conservative school district, and I welcome any community member to come in, sit down with our CFO, look at our finances, and I can guarantee you will find this. We are a truly fiscally conservative district, and it's something we're proud of. We've had a balanced budget, always put a balanced budget before this board. Since I've been here, since I've been superintendent, even before. It's something we just believe in.
Thank you, Shay. Thank you, Daniel. I do want to add this disclaimer to this podcast. Currently, right now, the school board has not called for a bond election as we recorded this podcast on July 11, 2022, which gives us that flexibility to talk more a little, to expand on these topics.
It, yes.
Exactly, which is once they call for that a bond election, we have to stick to those facts and not really elaborate on and advocate for projects on the bond and the how we're going to advocate for it. So,
and Cecelia, I think you said something that's just really key that I would like to clarify right now, is that it's not us advocating for it, is what is perceived or defined as being an advocate for it. And that's the part that frustrates our citizens, is that they would see us as just providing facts. But there are so many limitations and so many rulings in the past of governmental entities being tagged as, no, that was advocating, that word you used, that picture you used,
yes.
Whatever it may be. And so not only is it that we can't advocate, we can't be perceived as advocating.
Well, that's crazy that you mentioned that. Sorry, Daniel, to interrupt you. But even our marketing material, when we have a smiling child on a playground, we can't use that kind of photo because that's perceived as advocating for the bond. So we do tread lightly, even in the communications department, on what we can put out.
Right.
And I do want to mention, we have a long-range facilities planning committee that has done a fabulous job, and these are wonderful volunteers from our community. I do want to I want to let the voters know and community know that, yes, we have met with them since the bond did not pass. They are reviewing what we asked for prior, and we don't know yet if they do decide to ask the board to call for the election. We don't know what projects will be in at this point. Will be in this next bond should they call for it.
Well, we do know that one of the topics of discussion with the Long Range Facilities Planning Committee is the expansion at the high school. And I think that's going to be our next topic for discussion as we continue with our episodes with Ask the Superintendent. Until then, we'll see you next time.